Well, we will call this meeting to order. Let's see, I will start roll call. Anderson, Bork, Gade, I already heard me here. Sorry. Grimm,
Here.
Harrelson,
Here.
Krylov,
Here.
Murray,
Here.
Shetty,
Here.
Silman,
Here.
Smith, Hesley, Traer.
Here.
All righty, great. And then staff members present.
Sarah Gardner present.
All righty. And then can we get approval of the minutes from the June 2nd, 2025 meeting? Or any changes requested to be made?
Harrelson, motion to approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I just want to say, that was a lot of work, those minutes. Visually big. Thank you, Diane and Sarah. Really.
It's a good reminder to also mention your name while today too. All righty, so we will move on to our first agenda item, the announcements and reports. No action items from the last meeting, so we're looking at events.
Yeah. So the first event we want to note is that tomorrow night at the National Night Out being held at Weatherby Park, we are going to have Climate Action staff and AmeriCorps members present to host a cooling station. As you may recall, this was one of our big initiatives to roll out this year to offer cooling stations at community events. We've been fairly limited in the number we've been able to do because a number of them got rained out due to intense storm activity. So cross your fingers for clear skies, and tomorrow night we'll have folks out at the park participating in that event. And then we have a couple events we want to put on the radar a little early for September. The first is that we have been collaborating with our colleagues, our transportation planning colleagues in the MPO, to conduct a volunteer bike and ped count. We are asking for volunteers to serve in one of two shifts over the course of 3 days to stand at key intersections and help us just get a count of bikes that are going through, people on foot who are going through, and a couple other details. This data is going to be used to help us with a before and after picture for the bollarded bike lane pilot. That's going to go in and also help us evaluate maybe some potential other future streets that may be good candidates for that activity. So if you have an interest, I will say Angie Smith has already jumped right on it and signed up for a shift. People will be assigned people will be assigned an intersection based on their availability. You can sign up as a pair if there's someone you would like to volunteer with, or we can match you with another volunteer. So anybody who has an interest in participating in that, feel free to reach out to us and we can send you the link to the sign-in form.
And can I ask a quick question? Are those all times of the day or?
No, there are two designated periods. We're hoping to catch the morning and afternoon commutes, essentially.
I see.
And I think they're 2-hour shifts, but I'll need to double check on that. In your packet, you would have seen there was in your packet, there's a flyer that's going up around town about this, and that contains the link to the sign up as well. So you can cut out the middleman and go to that link directly to sign up if you're interested. And it is a great activity for students. That's just, I assume, part of why you're asking, Brenda. Great. All right. Oh, I should mention also, we ordered some fun sunglasses for all the volunteers as a thank you gift for standing out there. So that may be another motivator. And then we have Climate Fest coming up. This is going to be our 6th annual Climate Fest, which is hard to believe. But we have a number of fun activities scheduled. The first is we're actually, instead of, as in years past, running Climate Fest weekend to weekend, we're actually running it Thursday to Thursday this year. And part of that is so that we can kick it off by participating in National Parking Day, which is a national event that encourages the hooding of parking meters and the creation of pop-up parks in those spaces to help reimagine how urban spaces are used. We are also using it as an opportunity to call attention to the City Council's decision to increase parking rates as a way to help fund fare-free bus service. And we're doing that specifically because, as some of you may recall, that was a suggestion that came up in a climate action meeting to try to draw attention to the connection between those two. So we're actually going to be setting up our pocket park in the parking spaces that are between City Hall and New Pie Co-op. We have to hood them anyway for the EV car show the next day, so we figured why not do both. And we're going to be bringing in plants and lawn games and seating, and we're going to have a little lemonade stand with free lemonade. So if any of you are free between 4 and 6 that Thursday afternoon and want to stop by, please do. The next event we have, of course, is our annual EV car show. It's always the biggest attended event, in part because it coincides with the farmers market. We are once again seeing robust signups for folks who want to bring their electric cars to the event, which is a nice sign. That event will be held concurrent with the market from 7:30 in the morning till noon. And we're once again bringing in the book bike. And this year we've got some fun EV coloring books for kids, since the event also coincides with the kids market. So there'll be some fun reasons to come to that as well. And then on Monday, we are going to be at the airport. As some of you may recall, we had a ribbon cutting for the solar array down there in the dead of winter, which did not give a lot of people an opportunity to go out and see the solar array up close. So we're going to be hosting 2 different tours out at the airport that day, with the solar installer to go out and take a look and hear how they operate and let people walk right up to them and see how it goes. But we're also hosting, in collaboration with Public Space One, a solar art show at the airport up in the conference space. So they're going to have a lot of art that's inspired by and created using solar energy. And they will also have a cyanotype craft available, so anybody who comes can have a chance to make their own solar art to take home, which the nerdy 10-year-old in me really likes. And then we also will have laptops on hand, and we're going to be trying to hook people up with Project Sunroof, which is an online platform that allows you to input your address and see what the solar potential of your own rooftop is, in case anyone's interested in learning more about solar for their home. So nice array of activities for that event. The day after that, we are going to be down by the Iowa River at the Lagoon Shelter House, and many thanks to Brenda for helping arrange for us to be there. We are working with local author and researcher Connie, is it Mutel?
Mutel.
Oh, good. I never know where to put the accent. Connie Mutel, who 2 years ago came out with a book called Tending Iowa's Land that looks at air, water, and land quality in Iowa, both the challenges that we face as a state and the potential solutions. And each section has stories of everyday people who are making an impact in a positive direction in these areas. So this is a bit of a new event for us as well. We're inviting people to sign up for volunteer shifts to come down for 20 minutes and read a portion of the book out loud, just to give voice to it. And we're going to have a number of community organizations there who will be tabling and handing out information as well. And it'll be a nice day by the river. And Connie has agreed to come and kick us off at the very beginning by reading a bit from her introduction. So it'll be a nice opportunity to meet the person behind the book, which is fun. And then the day after that, on the 24th, we're going to be down at the bike library. We are highlighting the Resilience Hub efforts that we've been making at both the bike library and at NCJC by having an event at the bike library where people can come down, learn more about what Resilience Hubs are, take a look at the solar array that we helped fund as part of their Resilience Hub activities, learn about what the future plans are on this front for the bike library. We're also going to have copies of the zines that both the bike library and the neighborhood centers created as part of their Resilience Hub activities, both explaining in different ways what a Resilience Hub is and what it means for their organization in particular. And then we will have supplies available to help get started building your own home resilience kit that people can come and gather up and take home. So if you don't have a kit yet, it's a good reason, among many, to come and hang out with us at the bike library. And then finally, the event is going to conclude with, as you may recall, each year we do a film screening. This year we'll be doing a film screening in collaboration with Dream City. We're actually going to show 2 short films. The first one is called Born Curious, and it is about youth engagement with the outdoors and how it can inspire lifelong environmental engagement. And we are collaborating with United Action for Youth, who is going to help introduce the film and talk a bit about their Spark program that seeks to connect youth with outdoor camping experiences up around the Yellow River Preserve. And then the second film is called Green Buffalo, and it is about activities by the Lower Sioux Tribe, which is located in southern Minnesota, to forward the use of hempcrete as a less carbon-intensive building material that they are using as part of affordable housing initiatives within the tribal area and the surrounding area. And we are partnering with the Great Plains Action Society to talk about this as part of a larger Indigenous movement. Both films should be really very interesting. We're really excited about both of them. And Film Scene is donating popcorn for it, so they get to still be involved as well. So a whole bunch of events. We know in the past we have invited Climate Action Commission members to kick off events. There weren't some great fits for this, in part because we were partnering with partner organizations to kick off a few, but there are certainly plenty of ways to be involved. I'm trying really hard not to make eye contact with Zach so he doesn't feel like I think he's the only person here who owns an EV and can come to the EV car show. I want to be open to the possibility.
Have a new one this year. I'll be there.
Well, you should bring it. If anybody else has an EV they want to bring down, you get to hang out with us both. But if you would like to sign up for one of the 20-minute slots for the read-along down by the Iowa River, that's another great possibility. If you just want to come to one of the films or take one of the solar tours, all of this information is on our website at icgov.org/climatefest. Feel free, if there's one in particular you're really excited about, to just reach out to me directly and say, hey, how can I be involved? And we will find a way to fold you in. So, are there any questions about the lineup? Great. I do also want to give a real nod to Diane Platt, who's done heroes work getting our mailer together in time to go out to the whole community. So when a great looking document arrives in your mailbox, you'll know Diane was the magic behind it. Great. All right.
Like a great event, great week.
Yeah.
Yeah, impressive.
Does anybody have any other upcoming community events you'd like to highlight? All right.
Alrighty, that brings us to new business, legislative changes pertaining to open meetings law, training requirements, and increased penalties.
Fun for everyone. As you may recall, we sent out an email from the city attorney's office to each of you earlier this summer, and we included it in the agenda packet. There has been a change in state law that is requiring, before it was recommended, that all folks who serve on a commission or a board as appointed by the city council receive open meeting law training. I just want to emphasize, I hope that no one will feel unduly intimidated by this. It has always been the practice, as you may recall, when you joined the commission, that we reach out to you with training opportunities for open meetings law. We send you reminders with every email to not hit reply all. Like, we're very mindful about helping, largely because it's just best practices and we encourage transparency. But also, of course, we don't want anybody on this commission to get fined or feel like that would be a reason not to serve. So, long story short, we're going to continue to notify you of updates. It is not required for anyone currently serving to go through the training again, but we are strongly recommending it just to maintain consistency so that everybody has the same training as anybody who's coming new onto the board, and so that you can ask any questions, particularly knowing that violations come with some heightened fines, so we can help you navigate that space. I sent you some opportunities you can sign up for. We'll continue to do so. Once you take that, if you can send me your certificate of completion, we will keep that on file for here so that we can help support anyone who may find themselves in a sticky position on that.
there was no opportunity to register.
That's right. I think some of them were full already, and they were prioritizing people who are new to boards, but you should be able to sign up for them now, and we'll continue to send out future.
Now,
Yeah.
okay, because it said you can sign up weeks from now, and then there was no,
No follow-up.
no.
It was interesting. It was, I'm trying to look at the date, but it was a Saturday at midnight when it opened again. It was on, I think it's later this month, but I wonder if they changed it, if it was just
Yeah.
that something they looked over.
It'd be worth double checking, but I'll do so as well to see if we can find the portal opening for you. I think, as you can imagine, given that everybody serving on a board and commission across the state needs to, if they're newly appointed, hurry up and take this training, like they're really scrambling to create a lot of opportunities because you have to have a certified training in order to count.
Well,
So,
what's the format of the training? Zoom?
yes, it'll be a Zoom
okay.
training.
Yeah, the next one is for September 10th. You're able to register starting August 9th at midnight. So this
At midnight.
weekend, look at it Monday.
Push the button.
Maybe not. Don't set your alarm to wake up.
Would it be helpful if I set a timed email to go out Saturday, just remind, or Sunday, to remind everybody to sign up if you'd like to? Okay, I'll do that. Any other questions about that?
Will there be do you have to do that again every year or something, or is it a once and done?
It should be a once and done as it's currently written. Have you discussed this with your boards?
Okay, that's okay.
I mean, you're certainly welcome to take it repeatedly if you're like, this is cool law.
We should all get together and have a party and go.
Yeah.
Kidding, kidding.
All right.
All right, perfect. So now we're on to old business. So in the comprehensive plan presentation, we have Ann Russet here.
As you may recall, I also sent out an email with several questions asking you to think about as related to the comprehensive plan. And I do want to say also that this discussion item came as a suggestion from Michael Anderson, who just felt like we could discuss it a little more thoroughly. And I mention that only to say, please always feel like you can reach out and say, hey, can we discuss this more? We can put things on the agenda. I feel like we don't maybe say that often enough to all of you, but that is a possibility. And I'm always happy, in that case, he asked to meet and discuss like what we might be able to do. And so I took the suggestion back to Ann, who said it would be great to hear further thoughts, like knowing that you got a whole lot at once from the consultants and maybe not enough time to really sit with the questions. So it feels good on every level to circle back. That being said, we can go through this one of two ways. We can run through the list of questions that I sent you and we can discuss them one by one. Or if you have strong feelings and want to jump in on a particular point, we can just popcorn around on them. Does anybody have feelings one way or the other?
How about one by one?
One by one? All right. So the first question I asked you all to think about is related to density. There were two questions there. And one was, as we think about future development, and I should say, let's discuss this together. Don't feel like you have to direct your answers to me or Ann, but to each other. But as we think about development, does it make sense to continue to pursue very highly dense areas in the middle of the city and less dense areas elsewhere? Or should we be pursuing more of a mix of densities and new development? And I feel like we got to this a little talking about the idea of 15-minute cities, but I think it's worth expanding on that question just a little. Does anybody have any thoughts? Nadia?
Yes, I'm focusing on the climate aspect of this rather than on just urban planning. And the only thing I can see is that pursuing highly dense in the middle would create more pedestrians and shorter commutes, whereas mixed densities might create the opposite.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, the thing is, if you create, the more dense the center is, the more pedestrians there are in that center, so you have a lot more live-work spaces, which creates a pedestrian lifestyle. If you make it, if you balance it with green spaces, opportunities for food, shopping, or deliveries, so you're basically reducing the supply lines. Whereas when you put things out there, then you have an apartment, I mean, just visualize it, you have an apartment building, and it's far from where work is, then people have to get back and forth. Even if in an EV, then you need parking. Whereas having density in the middle, that is live-work, is you're saying you don't need transportation at all, or you can have a lot more of those zip cars or whatever it is. You're just reducing supply, the supply lines, like, so that's from the climate perspective, that's what it looked like to me. And the other problem that I saw with creating densities in the non-dense areas is like apartment buildings. If you put apartment buildings out there, unless they all are mandated to have parking in the building, what you're doing is putting cars, because in this climate, you're still going to have cars. You're going to have a lot more cars on streets. Well, I have a problem with the bike lanes anyway, but that makes it less, the streets aren't clear. So anything built out there would have to have off-street parking. So, but still, again, it's transport. You're increasing it, so I don't know, that's what I could see on that question, how to weigh in on one or the other. It'd be great to hear the other side of it from someone.
Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, go ahead.
I have a slightly different suggestion, not in conflict with that, but that the current bus system for the city be seen as a template for where people, if density is increased, could get on the bus and go downtown or get around the way they'd like to. That's how it works for me. I ride the bus all the time. And that we also publish the fact somewhere that you can get on the campus buses for free as well. And I didn't know that for months, but that's true, and it's just as convenient. So it also seems that it's the same sort of idea that people who use buses when it's convenient, which it is for me, then drive less. It's just that simple fact, even though I have a car. So I came today on the bus. And so density, looking at the bus system we have in place, whether it's closer or further away, as a way of utilizing and maximizing bus travel, at least as much as possible.
That's sorry, go ahead, Silman.
Oh,
I was also going to mention.
This is Silman. So I live in a neighborhood that has mixed density, and there's, duplexes, single-family homes, townhomes, and then apartment buildings close by. And I like living in, that kind of an environment. You get to know people of all different ages. And then there are some places nearby that have, built restaurants, coffee shop, that kind of thing to make it easy for the residents in those areas to go and use. And then, there's bike lanes that are, beginning to better serve the area, and buses too, even though it's still a little problematic with the buses. But I think that is really that was attractive to me. And I think that, you've got to think also about where do people want to live, like when people are living in fourplexes or whatever, condos, a lot of times they don't want to just live where there's no green spaces. And so, that enables people to have a variety of different kinds of living situations, but still have some of those amenities that you appreciate when you have a single family home or lower density housing. So it puts it together. I don't know. I would be a proponent for the mixed density housing.
This is
Too.
Yeah.
this is Harrelson. One thing I noticed whenever I was looking at the map, a few places around town in the commercial districts, we have things designated as neighborhood centers, and I hadn't really heard of that before, although it makes sense where they're at and looking at the map. And I kind of just thought, actually, if anything, we could probably use more of those. And that might be a really interesting way to kind of do both, right? To focus, because we talk a lot about densification, and I think from a climate perspective, that is something that is beneficial in a lot of ways, but it allows you to focus your efforts on where do we do that densification rather than just, because one of the other questions was using vacant lots for upzoning. Well, then your opportunity, it kind of just comes up where it comes up, and you're not really thinking of, or doing it sort of intentionally maybe. But if we focus around the neighborhood centers and try to densify around those areas, and as well, we talk a lot here about mixed use, right? Then those neighborhood centers sort of become like nuclei or seeds, and the densification can kind of grow from there maybe. And the things you're kind of talking about you get little coffee shops and things popping up around there. I don't know, that's at least the way it was kind of rolling around in my mind as I was looking at the map.
That would work perfectly. The thing that I envisioned when that combination of just vacant lots and doing it was a stranded apartment building.
Right, and that's
And so that's
kind of rough.
That's what you're saying fits my idea of creating little neighborhoods, really, yeah.
So let me see if I can capture this accurately. It sounds like the consensus seems to be forming around the idea of having nodes within the city that have mixed density, and it sounds like what we're talking about is more medium density of a combination of apartments, condos, townhomes, quadplexes, I said apartments, some condos as well in the mix around areas where people can access commercial activity and employment centers. So, for example, this didn't come up, but as I'm thinking about it, some place like around the Sycamore Mall area where we also have an employment center with P&G, there would also be a mix of densities there for folks who are working there, the same way we would hope to have some density around downtown for folks who work downtown, and that these nodes would be connected by the bike lanes where we would also, or not bike lanes, wishful thinking, the bus lines as well, where we might see some mixed density around those bus lines to increase access for bus usage. Does that sound accurate? Cool. All right, one question down. Zach, you pivoted really well to the question of upzoning vacant lots. Do we want to take up that one next? Did anybody else have additional thoughts? It sounded to me like you were saying maybe not an automatic upzoning because it doesn't feel deliberate, maybe a more targeted around these nodes?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think, that can be a great opportunity if it makes sense, if that's something we want to do and are trying to do in that area, absolutely, but not just only because it's vacant, right? I don't know.
Could you also define upzoning for me, just so I'm sure I understand?
Let's ask the pro in the room.
Hi, everyone. Ann Russett, Senior Planner. So when I think of an upzoning, I think of any going from one zoning designation to another zoning designation that allows more intensity of development. So it could be a single-family zone to a multifamily zone where the single-family maybe allows single-family duplexes, attached single-family, and then multifamily would allow apartment buildings, for example. But it could also be for a commercial zone from neighborhood commercial, which is probably more like the neighborhood centers that you saw on the map, Zach, to an intensive commercial, which is almost kind of quasi-industrial. So,
Okay, thank you. Yeah, one of the reasons I was wondering was because I was wondering if it could go from residential to business, that sort of thing, because I know that there are pockets around town where there are vacant lots, but it's in a residential neighborhood, but wouldn't it be great if it was a restaurant or a coffee shop?
that would be an upzoning too, I would think, and our commercial zones do allow for both commercial and residential development, so that mixed use
One
aspect.
question about that. What do realtors say about this in terms of the property values in the area that gets upzoned or is suddenly next to something? How is it regulated in terms of what goes in? Or is zoning just, you can put anything in there suddenly in a,
You mean the property values of the property that's being upzoned, or?
that's around it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to that. We hear people say, oh, my property values are going to go down, right? I don't think anyone has done.
And do they?
See, the thing is, I don't think anyone's analyzed this to determine if it actually has an impact. I think generally, property values go up in Iowa City consistently. I don't think we've seen any evidence that the opposite happens, especially from, a multifamily project. In my opinion, that is not going to reduce property values of neighboring single-family homeowners.
Would you say, Anne, it's fair to say one of the purposes of having a comprehensive plan is to make sure that in instances where zoning changes, it's to ensure that it's kept within the character of the larger area or within the larger plan, so that if we're talking about upzoning a vacant lot in a residential area, what you're more likely to see is something like, well, I don't feel like anybody builds 3-story walk-ups anymore, but you might see like a 3-unit building rather than a sudden high-rise in the middle of a neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we definitely look at before, we've been talking a lot about zoning, but the policy is really what's going to be driving the zoning. And so where these neighborhood nodes are, where the mix of housing types is located, that would dictate future changes in zoning. And hopefully, like through this planning process, we identify transitions. So it's not, I think what you're saying, what maybe you're thinking, Sarah, too, is that it's not going from one single-family home to a 30-plex, but there is some gradual transition and a mix of housing types between those uses.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because I feel like that's something that helps prevent against, a sudden shock to the property values.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in a neighborhood in the western suburbs of Chicago where that became a problem because it was done kind of ideologically. We have to, business has to go in here, and the kind of business wasn't regulated, and there was a little corruption involved and everything. So I just hate to see that happen. And I know it wouldn't happen in Iowa City. But the realtors are very powerful, at least they were where I lived in the western suburbs. So they would have to be involved, I think, or at least the big companies somehow. Or is that not done?
I mean,
Not involved, I mean, like,
I don't think they dictate the policy.
not
I
dictate.
think we are in communication with realtors?
Yeah, I think they're on our steering committee, and we've definitely been in conversation with them, but they're not leading what gets developed in Iowa City. You know, oftentimes they're not even involved if we're talking about new construction. We're working with a developer and a contractor, and there's no real estate agents involved.
I want to make sure I understand your concern and what you're advocating for, Nadia. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is we should involve not, or be mindful not to let realtors steer the course, or are you saying they should be involved?
Well, the thing is that it became the experience in the western suburbs, it just became unnecessarily polarized, because as you're pointing out, that there's, people think this happens, but it actually doesn't happen. You know, like people think maybe the real estate value, they say our values are going to go down, but they actually don't go down. So being prepared with the facts about that could avoid polarization, because it's not going to cost anyone anything. You know, it's not a huge point. I don't want to belabor it. It was just a small question that I kind of inflated a little bit, so.
Oh, it's good, we appreciate it. It sounds to me like, I guess I'm not sure how to characterize the consensus on this one, that it sounds like we're agreeable to upzoning if it's thoughtfully done within the context of the neighborhood. Okay, all right. Let's shift to talking about rivers and creeks, very pressing question. There's floodwaters up everywhere. So the city has gotten called on from multiple corners to increase engagement with the river. And so one of the questions we had is, what should the corresponding vision for land use along the river be? Should we be increasing natural areas along the river, for example, so more parkland around it? Should we be continuing the current mix of some natural areas and some commercial areas, where those commercial areas block you off from accessing the river? Or should there be a different balance we're trying to strike, you know, some commercial development that maybe itself overhangs the river or engages with it in some way? Being ever mindful that, you know, the next question is about development in the floodplain. Does anybody have any thoughts on this one? This is a complicated question.
I did have some thoughts. This is Gade. I was looking at the vision in the comp plan that was also sent, I believe. And I really like the vision, and I think we should still keep and build up the natural areas and having that be the focus rather than the commercial mix. But the vision, Iowa City will grow by following patterns of compact development that emphasize pedestrian access and that preserve sensitive ecological features, critical wildlife habitats, natural terrain, and future green space. I don't think we should change that. I feel like we should keep it and really invest in, keeping it the green space really, and having a good outlet for activity outside by the river and not commercialize that space.
Just recently, I read a story in the newspaper of a community where they were being very deliberate about how they were designing their space according to like the flood zones. So instead of creating grids of streets, the streets were curving, and then they created like higher areas where there were streets, so that even when it got flooded, the people could still access different areas. And so everything that was being developed in this particular area was paying attention to what would happen during times of flood, and which makes so much sense to do that. And so, like having those natural areas as buffers just makes sense from, the perspective of, knowing that we're increasingly having these, events happening, and that being thoughtful about how we're developing everything so that it pays attention to what's naturally occurring just makes sense from a financial perspective as well as, ecological perspective.
Can I ask, is there an area in town that you think is a good example of this, of where we have a sort of nice green space development that interacts well with the commercial development around it to create that kind of double layer?
There's one that I can see, it's so close to being that. It's Terry Trueblood for biking, but there's the Big Grove Brewery is right there, and if you had a path that went straight from the path to the back of the Big Grove Brewery with a big rack of for bicycles, it would attract more people to have as a destination going for coffee on your bike. I just remember that from Lakeshore Drive, we used to go up and down. There were lightweight enterprises where you could have a coffee and it becomes a destination and it gets people on a bike because parking is scarce there. Mm-hmm. So looking for opportunities where you can create a connection that creates a destination like the nodes, like what you were talking about, something that has you out, but you have a little social thing that's kind of lightweight. It's not a heavy duty commercial anything. It's actually a draw for fewer cars. So like that area, and it wouldn't disturb anything. So how do you do something like that without disturbing the natural area around the river? And Bob has trained me well in thinking about the non-human inhabitants.
Friends of mine, you mean?
Yeah, the squirrels and all that is like to look for opportunities like that it is there, but it's kind of enclosed. Here we are, we're all natural, but it's also like you can go around and around and then you leave. Mm-hmm. Whereas there's opportunities nearby with just little dendrites, mm-hmm. Neurons to connect things.
Can I ask, so that I'm sure I understand, so you're talking about the trail that connects Terry Trueblood to Big Grove and the bike parking that's available at Big Grove. Is what you're trying to say is that the bike trail should continue further up the river to connect to other commercial areas along it that could be developed in a similar way? Or are you talking about a more intensive bike development at Big Grove?
I'm saying that when you're at the little parking lot there, when you come in where you stop and then you get off your bike and there's a little playground, there's no real way to get to Big Grove from the back. You have to go on the street.
There's a bike lane behind it.
Mm-hmm. Behind it.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
goes,
there's a bridge over to the
it
park.
goes all
By
the way to
river
Terry
crossings.
Trueblood.
Why isn't it obvious to us? We've been going biking there.
Yeah, it's just, if you keep a,
Okay, yeah, all right, I'll figure it out, but I'm just, sorry. But so there's one. So I'm just saying, not develop it like with miscellaneous commercial, but only things that actually support pedestrian and bike. So there's commercial stuff, but it doesn't disturb, it doesn't go near the river, it supports its enjoyment.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I think I'm tracking.
I was thinking about that area as well, and I was going to say, I think that actually is the spot where we've done a very good job. The park there is a really great buffer zone, and we have spots of like more manicured area, but also the more kind of wild area. I think that's a good balance. And then you've got a good standoff from the river to like Big Grove and those apartments and things there. So I think we're all getting at the same thing there. But yeah, to me, that would be kind of what we would want to emulate, I think, in my mind.
This is very funny.
No, that makes sense. It's very helpful. Thank you. You know, and I think the nice thing, it's worth noting, when you have consistent development like that, then all the commercial entities that are beyond the buffer still have the benefit of being waterfront properties, right? Because they've got the park and the water. Yeah. Cool. So next question is very important. Should the city continue to allow building in the 0.2% floodplain, which used to more commonly be referred to as the 500-year floodplain, if the structures are raised 1 foot above flood level, which is what we do currently? You can build in the 500 floodplain if you build your structure a foot above what the flood height, projected flood height would be. Or should we be suggesting that future development should not be in that particular floodplain, the way we've regulated it out of other, like the floodway, would you say? Yeah.
And that would be for dwellings, like residential?
I believe it'd be for both, or?
For
Yeah.
both, okay.
This is Shetty. What is best practices across cities about our size on the flood zone, or is it just different depending on communities?
I don't know if I can answer that. I think it's probably not very common to completely restrict and have no development potential within floodplains. There's certainly areas, and Iowa City is an example, and there's other communities like this out there as well, where there have been major floods, and then there's been buyouts, and there's been areas that have been kind of hoping to transform from a residential neighborhood to a park. If you think of the land west of City Park, that's kind of the goal of the cities for that area.
There are, it's been a long time since I went through floodplain manager training, but there are some alternatives if you do allow development in the floodplain. You can also build your buildings so that the flood waters can flow through it unimpeded and then be cleaned up and put back into service. And I think that's the plan for some University of Iowa buildings. Yeah, so we allow that currently.
This is Selman. What are some buildings that have been, built in that floodplain with the, following those regulations where it's like so many feet above the flood? Have there been any built?
I think Hansher is an example of one. Didn't they have to raise Hansher up?
They probably did, but since it's the university, they're not subject to our zoning regulations. I'm just trying to think of an example, like of a private development.
Yeah. Partly it's a very new question in some ways, because most cities built along the rivers first. That's where they formed, right? And they formed with an understanding of flood patterns that, as we know, are changing as a result of climate change. That, a 500-year floodplain, it used to be you'd get a flood in that area once every 500 years, and that clearly is no longer the case, right? So in some ways, we're trying to catch up our built environment with this new climate reality. And I'll say, again, it's been many years since I have taken any training for floodplain management, but I remember this being very hotly debated, right? And very local, so I think it's a local decision still in many ways.
I feel like the biggest question would be like, what's the benefit of building there then? You know, if a flood comes and, you know, there's a residential dwelling, even if it's raised, there could still be people stranded there for, you know, a few days, just depending on how long that water is going to be up. So that'll be, you know, just another kind of kick the can down the road, another issue that we, you know, would have to respond to, make sure they're okay. You know, maybe commercial or other developments could be a little less risky rather than residential. But yeah, I think I would just keep, like, what's the benefit of having it there? Yeah, obviously with climate change, the rain increasing frequency and just unpredictability of it's just going to happen more often. So I would err on the side of caution almost, and maybe not.
Yeah, it's Krylov, and I agree with that. And the question that I wanted to raise was about insurance.
Yeah, it's
Because that would just raise insurance, not just for the people in that, but for everybody, because it increases the pool. When we moved here, I looked at floodplain issues and things like that. I was pretty thorough. We live on a little hill. We're absolutely not, but our flood insurance, she said, you share the expense. So that would just increase insurance for everybody. And the other thought I had was that one of the things there is not a shortage of is land. So why do that? So that goes with.
And I want to be mindful of your time. Do you need to leave to pick up your daughter?
Thank you.
We'll continue the conversation. It'll be recorded. Anne can watch it in the morning. And you'll just have to hobble through with my limited expertise.
This is
Thanks, Ann.
Bork. This might be a silly question, but how large is this floodplain? I feel like I need to see a map or something.
Oh, that's a good question. Ah, and we just lost Anne.
Oh, you can actually look it up. There's
Can we?
Yeah, let me see if I can work on
government, there's a government.
pulling one up. The short answer is I'm just going to use the old terminology because I think that's what most lay people are most familiar with. There's the 100-year floodplain and the 500-year floodplain. And the floodway, which is basically the river itself or the creek. The 100-year floodplain tends to be a little more narrow, and the 500-year floodplain is much wider. And I'll see if I can pull up a map and pull it on screen while we're discussing this. It might be actually a good opportunity to bridge into the next question, which is, do we think these regulations should apply to creeks as well as rivers? And part of the reason this came up when we were discussing it with planning staff as a potential question is that creeks have historically been a blind spot for a lot of communities. Like, we're not used to thinking of creeks flooding. But as we saw just a few weeks ago in our neighboring city in Davenport, the Mississippi wasn't what was jumping its banks, it was Duck Creek. And we see a lot of residential development along creeks. So then the question becomes, do we need to start thinking ahead to buying out creekside properties when the opportunities arise, the way we've been buying out properties in the 100-year floodplain along the river? Or do we think creeks are an exception? I'll let you all discuss this while I try to pull up because if you, I will say, if you expanded the 500-year floodplain, we're talking about a lot of properties. So probably some long-term planning would be very beneficial there.
I'm kind of curious. I know you mentioned too that there were some creeks that have flooded a little more often. I can't remember, Ryerson Creek. I'd be curious to just prioritize that, maybe even talk to neighbors too around that area. You know, what have you seen, and kind of get more of some information potentially on what that looks like, because I mean, they don't live in Iowa City, but they live next to a creek, and year after year, it's just, there's some flooding, and it's just gotten worse over the years. Yeah, so the creeks are definitely something to to plan for, because I think that'll get worse.
And this is Silman, and I'm curious, like, how many creeks are there in Iowa City?
That hazard, I think they're pulling that up too. They should have the creeks on there as well.
Yeah, it will. I've got a map coming up here.
More than you realize, I think, is the
So it's like prioritize. So it's going to take some time.
I'll turn on projector. Here we go. So I don't know if you get, the difficulty is seeing it at the proper scale, but come back. It's been my day for city computers fighting me. So what you're looking at here, you can kind of see the floodplain for the city. This striped area, that's the, let me think, I think that's the floodway. This sort of golden color is the 0.2%. So this is the 500-year floodplain, the golden area. And then the bluish area is what was known as the 100-year floodplain. So you can see, I think this is Ralston Creek we're looking at on the side, that the 100-year floodplain for the creek is quite wide.
That's shocking.
Ryerson. I was thinking of Ryerson.
Wait until you get to the airport. This one blew my mind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually was asking our airport manager about this recently, about how the entire airport's in the floodplain, and he, like everybody positioned on the floodplain, kind of argued as to why it shouldn't be so. But this is based actually on flooding from a nearby creek rather than the river itself is how it got the designation. And he believes that there are some engineering structures that would prevent it from being entirely flooded. When that happens, sometimes people write to FEMA and ask for what's known as a map amendment to say you're officially not in the floodplain anymore, which has some implications for insurance, but I will say is also very hotly debated as to whether or not that means you're actually not going to flood.
When where I grew up in Marion, there was a place, an area on the edge of Marion that flooded every year. And then at some point, it was designated no longer a floodplain. And there were houses built on the further away from the creek, but still, though those neighborhoods got flooded. And people who bought those houses didn't know that that had been notoriously a flooded area, you know, forever. Because it just suddenly got changed.
Yeah.
Let me know if you want me to scroll to another area, but you can see here we've got, you know, floodplain maps are so interesting in part because here you can see there's a very wide 100-year floodplain, and the 500-year floodplain only adds a little on the margins. In other places, it's very different. And this that we're looking at now is a segment that follows a creek. So if we put on our climate hats, what would our recommendation be? I'm not sure that I
Don't build.
don't build.
Yeah, I mean, the floods are only going to get worse. So,
Okay. And do we think that applies to the 100-year and 500-year? That would be the recommendation?
I think since the 500-year doesn't increase a lot of, you know, land, that it would make sense to include it.
I think there was some discussion I heard earlier. I just want to make sure we're capturing it all accurately, that the don't build should apply to residential structures with maybe some allowance for commercial structures to build if they build to certain engineering specifications? Or,
I would put a caveat on there based on insurance estimates, because insurance
Well, yeah,
companies
if it's
are.
not going to be insurable, then they're not going to, there's no business case to build
But even
to.
if it's insurable, but it's really high insurance,
Fair.
it's, insurance companies are the most pragmatic organizations there are.
Yeah.
So just asking them what's the difference, differential, it's not a black and white thing. You get a better estimate because, as we know, insurance company aren't asking, they are just leaving. They do their estimate, and I think we need to pay attention to that as part of the decision-making process. You're right, it doesn't have to be black and white, but we have to know what we're facing, know how much more. And given that it'll spread to everyone in the area, we'll all be in that same pool, it's kind of, would be more responsible to put that into the equation.
the other thing I think probably is worth considering is I think we're thinking a lot about impacts to buildings. I think the other thing I found myself thinking a lot about when I went through floodplain management training was that things get dislodged in floods, and so anything you put in a floodplain has the potential to be carried downstream. Does that factor into our consideration of allowing for commercial development in the floodplain? Like, are there certain uses that we think should not be there for the potential of material being taken out and carried down, or are there like construction techniques we should recommend so those buildings, I think we do currently regulate it so that the buildings are meant to withstand floods, but there too, I guess I'm thinking of a very specific example of a community north of us where there was a commercial property that the owner was using to store drums of various things that
Chemicals.
then came out the windows when the building got flooded.
Yeah.
But that's a worst case scenario. So the question is, do you regulate? It's an honest question. I have thoughts on it. What's important are your thoughts?
That's crucial.
It's also something that's maybe not, I don't have the data to like make this decision. Like I can't say, I guess. I know that the 0.1% floodplain is probably becoming the 0.2% floodplain if it isn't already. I mean, this data is from 2007. If it's not already, then it will be probably soon, but I don't know. So whatever we're doing in the 100-year floodplain, we should probably start doing in the 500-year floodplain, but I don't know.
Wasn't the flood in 2008?
The big one, yep.
And this is from 2000, okay.
Yeah. So, but I guess I don't know that I personally
I also pass on this. I simply don't feel I know enough about this to form an opinion that I could defend.
If we don't want to make a solid recommendation, another option would be just to raise a series of questions that we think should be considered as part of this. If we were to do that, what were the questions that you think should be considered by our planning staff and those on the steering committee for the comp plan in thinking about developing in the floodplain or future development in the floodplains along the river and creeks?
Well, to understand the impact, you have to really know this whole area. I don't know this area at all. I only know the part of the area I live in. So I just, looking at it, had no idea this extended way down here. And so I don't have any idea of consequences outside of my own neighborhood.
This is Shetty. I think that the insurance question is a good one to raise. Also, I'm wondering how much control the city has in regulating the type of building that happens once a property is purchased. Can they regulate the type, like between commercial and industrial, can they actually regulate the type of commercial building that's built?
The city has some, depending on the area, some ability to establish minimum building standards, and that's true for any kind of structure. For things going into a floodplain, in order to qualify for flood insurance, they have to be built in a certain way, which is really what floodplain management is about.
I think I'm getting more at like the type of business that it is.
The type of business.
Whether they have drums of things that are
Poisons.
I know, I hesitated to bring up the mystery drums, but yeah, there is some ability. Like, I think about, there are different ways of going about it, but it's very common for cities to regulate places where gas stations can go based on the underground storage tanks associated with them. So there's some parsing that can be done within commercial development areas for that. Yeah. I don't know all the gradations of it. That's where I wish Ann were still here, but.
And I guess that's a question to ask, since we don't have all the information.
So it sounds like the questions we would want considered are insurability and how it affects the pool of folks paying into that insurance. Also, what regulations the city can enforce in terms of commercial development along it, if commercial development were still allowable. It also sounds like we're thinking the 500-year floodplain should be treated similar to the 100-year floodplain, and maybe that should extend to creeks as well as rivers. Okay.
Yeah.
And then just to be clear, so that when I'm following up with Ann, I know what I'm saying. Currently, what we do for residential structures in the floodplain is we try to offer buyouts. FEMA will assist with those buyouts for houses up to about $350,000 in value. And of course, we know everything's changing with those regulations at the moment. I can say in Iowa City, we've kind of run up against the limit of the houses valued at that level, that now when we're buying out properties, we're usually using local dollars to do it because those homes are of a value higher than $400,000. So if we're talking about regulating creeks in a similar way to rivers, what we're talking about is potentially in the future using local dollars to try to buy out residences within the floodplain. Is that according with your vision, or do you think there's some more parsing there that should be done?
Well, I guess I have Krylov again. I have a question what regulation means. One of the things that I discovered about like climate resilience across the US, one of the ways that Iowa is thought to be resilient, even though it's at risk of drought, and the prediction is lots and lots of drought, is river management and flood management. So that's what I had in mind, is management rather than regulation. And it looks like what we're talking about is regulation in terms of building. And I was wondering what the mechanics are of actually managing the rivers in flood conditions. The implication was that somehow exists along the major rivers, the major tributaries.
You're talking about like regulating the flow of the river itself, that kind of
Yeah, some
management?
kind of management.
There is a degree of that. It is not within the city's purview to manage it. It's managed by the Corps of Engineers. And the way they manage it is by regulating, for us, the flow out of the Coralville Lake that comes out. In fact, they just increased the flow and will be increased for the next 2 weeks because of the floodwaters ahead of it. So there is some degree of control. It's not exercised by the city, but the city is notified of it. But there too, it has limits, as we saw in 2008. And one of the other difficulties with flood management of that type is that sooner or later, you are deciding which community is going to get flooded and which isn't, which is a terrible position to be in. In terms of what the city can do, because we can't regulate the flow of the water, what a city is able to do is regulate what's in the floodplain.
What's at risk?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so sorry.
I think it sounds like we've got some sense of the questions we want to put up there in the recommendations.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
In regard to buyouts. From this map, it's really hard for me to tell, like, the numbers of houses or housing that might actually be a part of that buyout.
We can try to find out. I will say it would be a lot.
Yeah.
It would be a lot of homes if we're buying out along creeks.
Yeah, which might be hard.
Yeah, how do you prioritize which places
Yeah, this is,
Housing shortage then.
in that,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, this is Silman, and, maybe there are some other things to ways to deal with it along the creeks too.
One way, I will say buyouts, you see, it's not common to see, as common, I should say, to see proactive buyouts. Like if we went out today and started putting flyers on the doors of all the homes along the creek saying, did you know you're at risk of flooding? We'd love to buy your home and demolish it. That does not happen as often. What you do see is, I will say, and I've heard this is a lesson learned actually in Iowa City, is that once it floods, saying, rather than rebuild, we can buy your home so that you could relocate. After the 2008 flood, when the city began initiating buyouts west of City Park, I was not here at this time, but my understanding is that it was optional. You could opt into selling your home or not. And one of the great lessons I think that was learned from that is that if you're going to buy them out, you should buy everyone out. In part because it just gets harder and harder. Like, as you clear away more of those homes, the remaining homes now are in an ever more park-like setting, which makes it like more difficult to leave, right? And also the property values continue to climb. And where you've got those park structures, and I think this is actually the core difficulty for the city now, right? You may be maintaining an entire block of water lines and power infrastructure to supply one house, whereas before the same infrastructure would have served 10, right? So I think some things you're starting to see in communities is that in the past where buyouts would be triggered by a second flood, you can rebuild once and take your chances, and then if it floods again, we'll buy you out, is to say, we're going to try to buy you out after the first flood event, recognizing the second's probably going to come one way or the other. And I think you're starting to see FEMA push in that direction as well too, but it's been a while since I've been in this area, so yeah. So given all that, would the recommendation be not to do necessarily proactive buyouts in the creeks, but to think about, should there be a future flood event that impacts them, to strongly recommend that those properties get bought out the same way they would be along a river?
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. Whew, that was a heavy one. Great, let's move on to transportation, a bit more fun. Are there transportation considerations related to multimodal travel, bike, bus, and pedestrian that are important to address? And I think we started to get to this a little with our earlier multinodal discussion and how that might relate to multimodal transportation. Was there anything we thought we should add there?
This is Harrelson. The only thing I would add to prior discussion is in thinking more regionally, I would also add rail to the mix to just keep that conversation kind of alive. If it's in the long-term plan, then we can keep discussing it.
Excellent point. How about the next question then about what the vision for electric vehicle charging throughout the city should be? You know, right now we have public charging that's owned by the city available in all the parking garages downtown. And then you're starting to see some added at gas stations. Should we also be including it in city parks? Should we be thinking about it along right-of-ways? I think about this myself in particular about potential impacts for apartment dwellers, right? Since we've not seen a lot of uptake of the grant we've been offering to put in EV charging at apartment buildings, should we be thinking about broadening where city-sponsored charging is to try to reach more folks in those areas? And this is the one where Robert caught my typo. Should we be thinking about requiring either EV charging itself or EV readiness, which means having the wiring and conduit in place so that at the time of construction, so that EV charging can be added? Should that be required as a percentage of our current parking requirements? So if you build an apartment and it's going to have 20 units, should at least one parking stall have wiring, for example, so that you could put an EV charging station if needed?
I use EV charging in the city all the time. And does anyone else on the commission also use it? Well, then I'd be interested in their views as well, particularly. I've changed my view about some of this because of my use of it. Of importance to me is maintaining the systems we have, because often they're not functional. And at least in my experience, the last visit to the Dubuque garage, neither side of the system was eligible for charging. So I don't know who's responsible for that once they're in city facilities, but showing up and not getting the use of the system is really disappointing, I must say. But downtown charging for me is very convenient and inexpensive, and I'm absolutely in favor of more of that. As soon as you get out of the downtown, my question would be, you wouldn't want to go to a charger. I wouldn't, unless I was going to be there for an hour or two, at least a level 2 charger, which is what I use. And so a park or something isn't necessarily where I would go unless the weather's nice or whatever. Mostly it'd be a shopping area, grocery shopping particularly, because now like out in Coralville, where we have all the superchargers, the Tesla superchargers at the Hy-Vee, that makes a lot of sense if you have a Tesla that uses supercharging. But probably most of us don't have the Teslas that use supercharging, so therefore we're looking at level 2 chargers, and that strikes me as there aren't many of those around other than in the parking garages. But also in the multi-unit areas, talking to the senior center people where they've started to consider this question in residential senior communities, where to put it becomes an issue because they often set up with different kinds of parking spaces. So I really would be wary of trying to move chargers into the outer areas of the community just with a good idea that somehow they'll be used without knowing who the users are and whether they want them. And we all know if we have EVs that the state has got a policy against us already financially. So we're not, you go to the dealers, there are very few available to buy. So I feel we're in a time period where the downtown makes perfect sense. Grocery stores would make sense to me as well for a level 2 charger. But beyond that, I think we really don't know how long it'll be before we have the use of this kind of investment.
And this is Krylov again about that. I agree with Bob you were going to say something too, right?
Go ahead.
I think I would bring up an equity question about this. Right now, EVs are super expensive. So you have, I looked up how many charging there is in different cities. In Iowa, by state, which city had the most chargers and how many? In Iowa, Iowa City has the most chargers. There are 38 chargers here. And I think part of the reason is because there's a lot of money in Iowa City. There are 1,500 doctors, and there are lots and lots of Teslas, but still, these cars are expensive at this point. So then it becomes kind of public, tax money being used for a technology that has not gone through its growth cycle. It's a luxury good for a lot of people. For most people, it's a luxury good. So putting it in parks, I would agree with Bob that that's kind of overkill. I think providing some chargers in the city, I would say at this point, the market has to drive it. And one of the things that I saw was that EVs are still selling, despite the fact that the subsidies, the credits have been removed. They're still selling. So I would say wait for the market to expand and for those prices to drop so that the people who are riding around in rust buckets aren't subsidizing chargers for people who can afford a $60,000 car. So,
Sarah, how long does this plan have to last us for?
Yeah, that's a good, typically it's 10 to 20 years. So we do want to think on a far horizon.
This is Selman. One thing that I've thought about a lot is having charging at places of business where people work. Because if you are living in an apartment, where else are you going to be most of your time but at a place of work? And so, I don't know if the city can regulate and that for workplace parking, but if that was, another option, then there would be, an equity piece in that because, everybody works. Everybody who has a vehicle most likely is working. And so providing that at your workplace, to me, makes sense.
Yeah, so not just apartment buildings and condos, but commercial spaces as well, a certain percentage of parking maybe.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say that we have thought a lot about in the Climate Action Office is figuring out ways to encourage EV charging at church parking lots. Because there are churches all throughout the city in almost every neighborhood. And those are parking lots that often sit fairly empty during the week and could serve as a charging location for folks living nearby. I do want to offer a little data that I think might be helpful in this discussion. As we've been working or collaborating with other communities on the Regional Climate Action Plan, I recently pulled the registration data for EVs in Johnson County for the last 5 years. I actually pulled it for the 5-county area. And Nadia, I think your sense is right that there are more EVs here than there are in other locations by a few percentage points. We're now up to about 5% of all vehicles in Johnson County registered as EVs. In the last 5 years, the adoption of EVs has grown by 300%. So even though it's a small percentage, it's grown quite rapidly. There are 3 times as many EVs now as there were in 2020. And we've seen that increase even over, one of the other data points I pulled was about new vehicle registrations. And new vehicle registrations overall are down and have been down over that same time period. So even as people are buying fewer new vehicles, more of the new vehicles, it's out of step. Like they're buying more EVs even as they're buying fewer cars overall, which suggests a fairly robust demand. And projections, actually I was just talking about this morning with the working group. We've been looking at revised projections based on the dialing back of the tax credits. It's not clear that that's entirely going to dampen that EV adoption. A projection of reaching 20% market saturation in the next 20 years is not unreasonable. Partly that's because I do want to push back just a little on the idea that EVs are luxury goods. Some of them are, some of them are not. There are some that are very cost competitive. And in fact, when we were handing over the keys this morning for the Ford Lightning that we bought for the AmeriCorps truck to the fire chief, because he is thinking about EVs for his fleet, we made him the same offer that we've made all the city departments, which is if you want to buy an EV, the Climate Action will pay the difference between what it costs to get an electric version and what you would have gotten otherwise. And that's a very easy offer for us to make, because in many cases, we're talking about a difference of $3,000 to $5,000 tops, and that number keeps coming down. So they're fairly cost comparable. When you add in the reduced maintenance and fuel costs, they're cost competitive.
Yeah.
These are things we anticipate continuing in the future.
That I agree with.
Yeah.
At a city level, for city vehicles, I think that's a perfect use of tax money.
What I want to be mindful of in this question, and what I would recommend is I can send some of this information your way just to help better inform the conversation the next time we meet. I want to be mindful that not everyone lives their life in downtown Iowa City, right? And so I want to be thinking about employment centers like P&G, if there are EV drivers there, are their needs being met? One way to get at that would be to encourage workplace charging. I'm not sure that we can require it. One way we could get around that requirement is if we say for future development for commercial areas, you have to be EV ready. Maybe not necessarily saying you have to put an EV charging station, but you have to have the wiring in place. And one of the reasons that's smart policy is that to retroactively go in and add it is very costly, especially if you're talking about surface parking and not ramp parking. There's a reason the city has put all its charging stations in ramps, and that's because it is orders of magnitude cheaper to do it that way than to have to bore down through the ground and connect to an electrical panel elsewhere. But if you can put that wiring in place at the time of construction, you're talking about costs that can be measured in hundreds of dollars instead of thousands of dollars. The other thing I think that's really important to think about is that 80% of charging, and that it happens at home, right? And so how are we going to serve members of the community who can't charge at home? It sounds like charging downtown when they work, and thanks for mentioning Dubuque, we'll look into why those charging stations haven't been functioning, is a viable option, but it may not be for everyone. And so do we want to put EV targets in place that say, we're going to have at least level 2 charging, somewhere near where everybody lives, similar to how we've been thinking about the 15-minute concept of nodes. Could we be thinking also like there's a charging station within 15 minutes of where you live, so you could park your car there, walk and do something else and come back and get it, even if you're just topping it off? I don't know, this is really like, there's not a lot to go off of. I can send you some of the recommendations that are made under the Charging Smart program, similar to the Soul Smart program that we use to take a look at our solar regulations. That may be helpful, and we could pick the conversation back up here if that helps. Cool. I'll just touch on the other quick items. Why don't we put a pin in our discussion of the building prioritizations, because that's something else I'd like to talk about together. We'll just take that back up at our next meeting, but I will give you a little homework between now and then, since I think we'll be able to wrap up this conversation and that one at our next meeting. And that is, now that you've gone through the prioritization process for buildings, I feel like we can move a little faster through the other sections. In your packet today, we included the updates for transportation, similar to the report you had gotten on buildings, so you can see the progress we've made over 5 years for all of those items. If you would go through and we gave you a score sheet and just assign some preliminary scores and note any questions you would like answered that may impact those scores for your next meeting. We can move through it a little swiftly that way when we get together. Does that seem like a reasonable plan of action? And I think we're going to have some University of Iowa students joining us at the next meeting to talk about nuclear energy and some research they did for us last term. So good meaty discussion awaits us in September. And I saw 4 hands go up for EV drivers, so that is 4 commission members I think we will plan on seeing at our EV car show.
How about a 16-year-old car driver that still gets 37 mpg and has less than 40,000 miles on it?
Amazing.
Right, Ford Focus.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We do, and we need to do the little recap. Yep. So our next meeting is going to be Monday, September 8th at 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. right here in Emma J. Harvett Hall. For follow-up items, I'm going to send a timed email Sunday to remind you all to sign up, if possible, for the public meetings training. I'm going to send a message through to our parking staff to take a look at the chargers and the Dubuque ramp to see why they may be intermittently functioning. And you all are going to think about transportation items and how to score them. And I will send you some EV data and some information from Charging Smart to help and pick our discussion right back up when we meet next time.
Sounds good. Motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Great.
Shetty seconds.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for your excellent discussion and thoughtful points today. This was really fantastic.